Prepare the substrate with a diamond grinder and vacuum the floor with a vacuum cleaner before you start the priming process. You see, it's really important to remove all other existing layers of resin or concrete lattice before you start the priming process. We are using 500 grams of Plastifloor 112 and Plastifloor 118 to prime these two parts of a 1 square meter surface together with 30 milliliters of hardener 50W, and the room temperature was around 10 degrees Celsius. Mixing into the hardener into the half kilo of 112 primer for at least 30 seconds before you can start the priming process. You will see that the color of the resin is changing. That shows the applicator that the guy who mixed the hardener into the primer did his job right. So you see the color is turning into gray, and the contractor or the installer knows the hardener is in. Then apply approximately half a kJ per square meter. Here we are using 250 milliliters for the half square meter. In the field, we recommend to use a thick roller to apply enough material. This is really important. It's not good just to apply 200-300 grams, because this material can be sucked into the concrete and then you will not receive a full layer of resin. So half a kJ a square meter is the ideal amount that you should have on site. Sometimes a concrete is very dense and you don't need that much primer, but you should be prepared all the time to have enough primer on site to prime the surface completely. Even after curing, you need to check if the primer layer is completely hard everywhere and maybe need to reprime. You see here the glossy layer of the 112 primer on the left side of this total 1 square meter area. Now we do the same application on the right side with the Plastifloor 118. This is the typically, we call it the damp primer. Same ratio, 500 milliliters of primer 118 and 30 milliliters of hardener 50W. Mix it into the primer for at least 30 seconds, and also with this product you will see a color change. This is a good sign for the installer in front that the mixer and the back side of the side worked good and put really the hardener into the primer layer. So on the right side we do the same procedure after carefully mixing the hardener into the 118 primer and pour out approximately 500 grams for this pour out 250 grams for this half square meter. So the total consumption will be approximately half a kJ per square meter. You see the color of the primer changed, and Jan, our supervisor, is now pouring out approximately the half 250 milliliters using the small roller, but in the field it's really important to use a thick roller, because sometimes, you know, when you have a substrate that is not smooth like this one, a substrate where you maybe milled off an old epoxy or polyurethane coating, then it is really necessary that the primer gets deep also in the lower parts of the area to make sure that the concrete substrate is completely covered with the primer layer. So also here you can see that this amount, half a kJ a square meter, can be applied easily on this half a square meter area, and you see a glossy film of primer. And then when you broadcast the primer, it's really important that you use a clean sand, not a dusty sand. Size is 0.6 to 1.2 millimeters. This is what you should sprinkle slightly on top of the primed surface, even when the primer is still wet. So approximately 200-300 grams a square meter is complete enough. You see, not too much sand into the primer. This is really important. Makes no sense to work like the epoxy guys, putting nothing on the floor and then fill it with sand. That's not working with Plastifloor resins. Okay, now it's 12:45. As I told you, 10 degrees Celsius in our warehouse, and we will see how long the curing will need. So after 10-12 minutes, the primer in the buckets starting to react. So you see it's starting to blow up a little bit, and it's a little foggy. And yeah, now 10 minutes past 1 or 7 minutes past 1, the material is completely cured in the small buckets. The 112 and also the 118 primer is completely hard, very short. And also you see on the floor, the resin layer is completely cured. You cannot remove the sand. The surface is glossy, and this is a resin layer on top of the surface. This is really important. If the primer sucked in some areas, you need to reprime. And even when you use a spatula, you cannot remove the primer. It's completely sticking on the concrete substrate. This is a good sign. We will show you in another video also the adhesion to this grinded substrate with the adhesion meter. This is just a manual test to show you primer sticks completely on 118, and it sticks on the substrate also on 112. You cannot remove it after 20 minutes after applying. Yeah, this is really important, you know, that you follow these rules when you install Plastifloor primers. It's important to have the minimum amount of half a kJ a square meter, and broadcast slightly the substrate with a clean sand 0.6 to 1.2 millimeter. With this procedure, you will receive a perfect result.